SK getting any more points right now, but Salty Potatoes, as you said before, definitely a dark horse coming in.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups where Salty Potatoes, they have a good legitimate chance against SK. You know, it may not come to fruition if SK is fully focused on this matchup as they should be. They are a team that should beat Salty Potatoes, but if they look forward to the finals, even just a little bit, if they look past Salty Potatoes just in the slightest, that's when Salty Potatoes can sneak up on you.
Especially since SK have very clear draft patterns now that we have seen their weaknesses being abused yesterday. So if Salty Potatoes come prepared and try to outdraft SK, target their weaknesses, they can definitely pull this series through.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this draft is going to go, because we've seen a lot of different teams in Europe going with very different styles and very different strategies, so I'm curious to see what Salty Potatoes will bring to the table, as we didn't see them on stream yesterday during the day, but this is them going against G2 last week, and honestly, an exceptionally close series between G2 and Salty Potatoes. Let's remember, G2 managed to get second last week with a 2-1 series against SK, and if Salty Potatoes were that close to G2, this could be an incredibly close series. But let's talk about their opponents coming into this one. It's going to be SK Gaming. Now, obviously, we've already talked about how they are the favorites, but what is it about this team that makes them stand out in the way that they do?
A lot of it is just the way that this team has adjusted with their lineup. Obviously, you see Raph was the starter coming into the season, but it has become Hegman as the starter for this team in the captain role. And we talked to Tyrus yesterday. He's told us it was that the shot calling that he brings to the table, just that extra voice on the team to be shot calling in the early game. That's where they've looked so crisp and so decisive.
I agree. I mean, you mentioned Mentrables. Why are they the stronger team? What is it exactly that they do? Their early game aggression and their early game rotations and what they focus seems to be on point, and that has to be credited to Hegman's shot calling, most likely like how Tyrus said, he's shot calling the early game rotations. So his shot calling is showing in their gameplay. They're very decisive and they're very aggressive, something unlike the European teams we've seen before in regular seasons.
It's paying dividends for them. I'm excited to see if they do make it to the World Championship, on what level they've managed to achieve on the global scale. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves there. Let's talk about the player to watch for this first game. It's going to be Sneaky. Now, obviously, Blackfeather has been a huge pick in the current meta, and this is something that we know Sneaky for in the past.
Yeah, and it's one of the strengths of Salty Potatoes is, while that is a pick that Sneaky is known for, it's one that usually ends up going on to the Joker for them. So they have these power picks that both their carry and their jungler, are exceptionally skilled at. But he's been playing a lot of the Kestrel as well this season. So, they'll oftentimes pick that Blackfeather early in the draft so that you don't know where it's going to end up going, or it gets banned away from them because it has been a priority focus this season.
To me, also, Sneaky is one of the better laners in Europe for sure, but he is fairly inconsistent. So going into this series, he needs to be consistent because this is SK you're playing against. So if he shows up and he manages to stay at the level that his potential can reach, he can definitely help his team get this series against SK.
Yeah, this is definitely not an easy team to live up to your potential against, though. It's going to be a tricky match for them. Let's talk about the draft, though, as we head on into this first game. What are we expecting to see? And I mean, we've seen SK a lot over the course of the last 2 weeks. Obviously, when you're winning the games, you get more games. So they've had a lot of camera time. Let's talk about Salty Potatoes specifically. What do you guys expect them to be leaning towards?
Blackfeather and Kestrel are two of their most played picks. They're definitely going to be trying to prioritize those two if they can get them in the draft. It sets you up with a really strong duo. You can, again, flex the Blackfeather if you need to. If you grab that early, the Kestrel can just provide that range that you need when Blackfeather is going to be going in and trying to be that front line, and you can still poke with Blackfeather if need be too. So that's usually ends up being their focus. They also really like the Lyra as a captain, so that could be one of the picks that a lot of teams aren't really focusing on the Lyra, so Salty Potatoes have a great opportunity to get that.
I also think Celeste actually might be a really high priority pick for the side of Salty Potatoes, just because Sneaky can play very well in the lane position. So if Blackfeather ends up being banned in some way, Celeste might come out, and we can see already SK taking that Celeste away from Sneaky, fearing it and respecting it. The Grace comes through for Salty Potatoes. That's generally just a very strong pick. It's very diverse, and you can play it with multiple things.
Yeah, the Celeste ban is also, it's not just the respect towards Sneaky, which it definitely is, but it's also SK. They don't play the Celeste. And so when you have a very strong hero like that you don't play and your opponent plays very well, you're forced to ban it away because you can't just you'd just be giving it over otherwise. Black Feather's going to get taken off the board as well, and of course, Salty Potatoes, because they let the Grace or the Catherine go through, they have to ban the Batiste.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, what's left for Salty Potatoes that's really a strong carry is the Kestrel. So if SK are really targeting Sneaky, they would go for the Kestrel, but since Idris is still left open, and we know that's one of Kvalifar's best heroes, they go for it and they take it to secure it before Salty Potato can take it away.
And going through this draft, it's a little curious to me that Salty Potatoes decided to ban away that Lance as the first pick, because I feel like I would much rather give a Lance over to SK with the Catherine than seeing them with the Idris. I feel like that's just a trade-off that they maybe would have been better off making.
I'm pretty sure they were hoping to get the Celeste, and they were banning Lance so that SK doesn't get to play that Lance lane against the Celeste like they did last weekend, and they were able to win with it. So I think that's what they were hoping for, and perhaps that's what prompted the Celeste ban from SK. The Kestrel comes through, like I was saying. Salty Potatoes, this is probably going to be going on to Sneaky, and now they have to close out with a CP jungler. They have multiple options here. If they wanted to go for a range composition where they can kite away the CP Idris, they could go for Samuel or Scarf. Or if they wanted to play a more regular double dive composition, they can still go for the Koshka still open. They have the Samuel comes through, like I was saying, though. So this is going to be a traditional double carry composition where you want to fight in formation, Grace in the front, Kestrel and Samuel behind her, and you're just using the tankiness of Grace while you're dealing the damage from the backline. So as long as you fight in formation and as long as you kite back, they can do really good against SK, and if especially they abuse their mid-game power spike, they can get ahead too.
Yeah, the one concern I have for the Salty Potatoes composition is the fact that they really lack hard engage. Their best engage is going to be coming from the Grace, and you don't necessarily want Grace to be on the front lines at all times. Like, yes, you want her to go in, but you want her to be able to go in and then immediately back out. Whereas this composition just doesn't really work like that. Like, they don't have anyone that can follow up when the Grace goes in. So they're really going to be relying on SK trying to be the ones to make the play, trying to be the ones to make the engagement, and then just countering that. Or they just need to set up sieges. And I think that's going to be the best way for Salty Potatoes to try and win this game, is to set up sieges in the lane, especially with the Krull. Krull is not very good at defending siege opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Salty Potatoes are going to want SK to be proactive and react to their plays. Krull is definitely a proactive pick.
Yeah, this is a very interesting draft because, like you said, Tasty Bacon, Salty Potatoes are going to try to want and siege to get advantages mid-game, especially with the Samuel. On the side of SK, however, they have a lot of pick potential and they have a lot of CC with the Catherine and with the Krull, especially once he hits 6. So I expect Salty Potatoes to try and siege while SK try to come up, get a gank, and if they get a kill, they can defend, and if Salty Potatoes gets ahead mid-game, they can close out the game.
All right, well, it's time to get on into our first game of the day. It's time to jump into our first semi-final here in Europe. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter. Let us know who you are supporting. But it's time to jump on into our very first semi-final of the day and get this Vainglory8 action underway.
Dalcy and X-Scoundrel here reporting in for the European semi-finals. SK Gaming X-Scoundrel looking to make it 3 weeks in a row. First place here. We'll have to see if they can do it going up against Salty Potatoes.
I'm going to comment, Darcy, you do sound a bit better today, which is nice. You know, getting over the flu, hopefully, my friend.
Hopefully. You know, worst comes to worst, you're a doctor, so you can just revive me mid-cast if I end up coughing too much.
From a remote location.
It's your duty to the British public.
Yeah, I don't believe I ever signed up for that. Anyway, we're going to be moving into this game. I think the desk hit the nail on the head pretty much. You have a Samuel and a Kestrel. That is basically one of the best sieging compositions in the game, especially in that mid-game 5 to 6 minutes. You're going to be looking to head into lane, use that drifting dark, use those glimmer shots, and try and chunk through that first turret very, very quickly against a composition that doesn't really defend very well in the early game. You can see Salty trying to get an aggressive maneuver here. Kvalifa.
Wow, very low. Pops that healing flask. It is going to be class repositioning. Tyra's trying to hold them back, but there is no range available to SK until Kvalifa unlocks his divergent pass, which won't be happening anytime soon. So a lot of windows of opportunity that Salty Potatoes can abuse, and just a preview almost X-Scoundrel as to what they can do.
Yeah, I think at this point in the game, before we get that CP built up onto the Idris, you're going to see Salty Potatoes take these small trades. You're going to see them look for skirmishes. Unfortunately, the timing of that meant that they weren't able to get much from that invade. They burnt a couple of healing flasks, specifically Hegman and Kavalifar. Those are now down, but they didn't get those backs, which really would have been the primary objective heading into the backside of the SK jungle. From SK managed to escape without losing anybody early on, which is always a good thing when you've got this later game scaling Idris on your side, because you know as this game scales on, admittedly, Salty Potatoes will always be able to keep their range. And I think the one advantage that they have in this scenario is that they have got good range. So if they can maintain that, they can use the Frostburn and the Samuel to maintain, keep that range, then they always have that going for them. Tyra's actually heavily in
fast. Here. Wow. That's a lot of aggression from SK. Tyra's does go a little bit low, but as a crew, he can potentially heal that back up. In fact, he's just going to go back, or he's going to fight. Here comes the Joker. That will be Tyra's immediately dying. Another kill will go over to the Joker. It's a double, and Kavalifar's now running for his life. He is out fairly safely, but oh man, that is an unconventional mistake from SK.
Yeah, and especially against the Samuel, something that Tyra's is so comfortable on. I think they just didn't really respect the burst damage coming out from the Mallet and Verdict with the Drifting Dark enabled, especially that the Joker's picked up a Heavy Prism, so he's already got a decent chunk of CP behind him. And Tyra's, whilst popping that healing flask, I think he was searching for that executing blow onto Clast, so was reluctant to pop his B, but maybe should have popped that a little bit sooner there, Darcy.
Yeah, would have given him the healing and potentially allowed for the trade to happen. SK now 2-0 down, 1,000 gold accumulated by Salty Potatoes in that maneuver. And we're still a while away until Kavalifar will add range to this SK roster with a very quick Frostburn picked up for the Joker in the jungle. This is siege time for Salty Potatoes.
Yeah, this is prime time right now for these guys. Kavalifar still in melee form. You've still now got the big item spike for the Samuel early on. Sneaky as well, almost at that Sorrow Blade, and needs about 400 gold more to go to get that. But right now, they can start up, head to lane, pop Drifting Dark, pop those Malice and Verdicts, really abuse this SK composition at this point in the game. This is where you're going to see Salty Potatoes take advantages. And the desk are right, this is a team that can beat the best of the teams in the European VG8 when they get the opportunity to do so and sort of find the right picks and find the right compositions. And right now, I mean, Salty Potatoes, they beat Fnatic, and admittedly Fnatic aren't quite at their best right now, and I don't think they've looked quite at their best since the Unified Western Live Championships, but it's still a very impressive team to beat. And Salty Potatoes right now have that small advantage against SK, undoubtedly the best team in Europe right now.
Certainly are, and have consistently proved that they are able to innovate and overcome their opponents. A Frostburn now finished for Kavalifar does mean that that range has been added for SK. There's a tension bow on Tyra's Cruel as well, which will allow for a lot of burst damage if he's able to position in a way that he gets onto one of those squishy backliners that Salty Potatoes have.
The Frostburn conundrum on the Idris. It's a discussion point every time it comes up in a game. What was that, Darcy, sorry?
It's not a conundrum anymore. Kavalifar just will build Frostburn every game, and there's no argument to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that me and you have discussed at length. I think a lot of people have discussed it at length as well, and it's not worth harping on about it forever. In this situation, would have preferred the Shatterglass, I feel, personally, but a lot of people like the ability to combo the Frostburn with the alternating current and the unlocked Idris divergent path to be able to have those basic attacks which slow, which often can be good at chasing down targets as well. So there are benefits to having Frostburn against squishier targets, but you do lose a lot of the burst that the Shatterglass provides. So I think it's a play style thing more than anything. I think I've come to the conclusion that it's definitely a play style variation. If you are looking to play more of a basic attack focused carry, chase people down and use that Frostburn with your basic attacks, I'll talk in a minute as Hegman goes in.
Yeah, Hegman does go in. That's going to be a stun over onto Class, but SK are disengaging. A one-shot will take down Hegman. Oh no, doesn't pop his fountain, so no burst healing to come through. Now SK,
could have popped
two men under the turret. Yeah, it's true. So, Hegman a little bit slow. This turret will go down as a result. Kavalifar may have to use his Shimmer Strike, depending on how aggressive Joker wants to be. Turns out SK are going to be fine here. And you talk about playstyle with the Frostburn. SK love that playstyle of the Frostburn because every time we do see Kvalifar on a CP Idris. It is generally double melee in the form of the captain and a jungler. So the argument there from SK is that Kvalifar is allowing for Tyros and Hegman to get in position to do more damage.
Yeah, absolutely. It combos quite nicely with the Cruel. You know, your basic attacks will slow down, allow Cruel to build those weakness stacks, and especially against a composition of a Samuel and a Kestrel, but quite hard individually to lock down if you're someone like Cruel, unless you're hitting an ultimate, then this can actually help facilitate Tyros in the mid game. But SK definitely on the back foot early on here. Hegman, I think I'm going to blame me for Hegman's performance here, Dalsy. I did play a ranked game with him today. I did go 0-6 on Celeste. I probably tilted him, so apologies, Hegman. Apologies.
There we go, Caster. Oh gosh, wow, that's going to be sneaky, just immediately deleted. Tyros finds a beautiful opening from that top bush in the lane. Now this turret is under siege, however Joker has a lot of tools available to him to make sure that it doesn't fall. SK not quite going to be in a position just yet to get that. Kvalifar will do a bit of damage with his Chakram to Joker and Class to want to push him back and just ensure that SK don't look for any further shenanigans.
Yeah, and actually, SK composition at taking turrets is not exactly great if you don't take a major man advantage when pushing the turret. You've got Kvalifar. As soon as he gets more CP behind him, he will shred turrets. Everybody knows that a CP interest will just destroy turrets if he gets given the opportunity. But this early on in the game, you know, it takes an extended period of time as this SK composition to actually pick up a turret. And that's not going to be possible even in a 3 versus 2 situation, because even, you know, Clast has got decent wave clear on the Grace, or at least wave stall in any way, shape or form. And with Sneaky and Joker, who have got great wave clear in their own right, it's going to take a little bit more than just getting a singular pick for SK to get any noticeable map advantage from turrets. What they could do, though, is by going for Goldmine, draw the Salty Potatoes roster in, as Clast responds to the stun coming out, as Hegman just trying to pick up as much as possible here, Dalsy.
So I want to draw your attention to Hegman's item build. Got that Void Battery in his pocket, meaning that he's not going to go towards a second item, Crucible, against a Holy Nova Oblivion composition. Could be a little bit risky for SK to take team fights at this point.
I think what he's essentially going for here is very early Echo to provide a huge amount of troll in these team fights. You can't Holy Nova if you're silenced, for instance. So he's just trying to buy time in these mid-game team fights to allow Tyros to do his thing. Class actually goes in here.
Yeah, Oblivion will go out. Tyros will get put to sleep, as does Kvalifar, but they've got the kill onto Sneaky already, and now they're looking for the Joker. Seems like that Oblivion wasn't too impactful in slowing down SK, as Tyros a huge burst, but not quite finding the kill just yet onto the Joker. May charge forward. Maybe they just turn their attention to Clast here with a Holy Nova, keeping him rooted. Joker's going to put a lot of damage down. A one-shot will connect, but the heal from that Spectral Smite will keep Tyros alive and dandy. And SK will take 2 for their troubles.
And the silence was so impactful there from Hegman as well. I mean, Tyros perfectly placing that ultimate to just catch out Sneaky, who was just being over-aggressive in his positioning versus Class. I don't think they respected the Cruel and his positioning in that particular fight right there. And Kvalifar able with 2 items now to actually have some sort of teamfight presence. 2 items CP Idris. It's not like it's to be, you know, knocking down the castle doors, but it's certainly going to be scathing you in the course of or duration of a team fight. It's when the Broken Myth comes for Kvalifar that we're really going to see this CP Idris ramp up. But right now, he has team fight capability, which really is sort of the 2 item spikes for CP Idris. Just means he can actually team fight properly with that alternating current. And you saw Kvalifar there, very, very impactful in his slowing and also getting a bit of burst off with those chakrams. SK finding their way back into this game, does.
Certainly have, and actually I quite like what SK have done now. The Echo's finished for Hegman. There's a lot of team fighting prowess, but Tyros picks up a reflex block, and Kvalifar picks up tier 2 boots, which means that, you know, a well-timed proc of the boots active will get him out of range of the Oblivion. Won't have to really need a reflex block, and keeps his item slots open for damage as well. As look at that, turret's very low. Tyra's trying to find a opening once more, but this time Clast will spot it out with a flare. SK are ready to team fight with that Blast Tremor back available. The Echo as well. Hegman may go in for it. A stun comes out. Here's the Blast Tremor. Silences. Echo silence again. And oh dear, Joker's dead. No Founder can be used because Clast was silenced. Kvalifar may have gone a little bit too close, but a Fountain will come out. And now Salty Potatoes will lose their turret indefinitely, but will they lose their lives is the question. It depends on how SK want to go. Hegman finds the stun onto Sneaky, but that will just be it for now. SK going to disengage and push the wave into the turret.
And you saw how impactful double silence was this early on into the game. 2 key points there, by the way. Class not level 8, so hasn't overdriven the Holy Nova. So at this point, Hegman can still stun him out of it. He did at the very start of that fight and chained it into a double silence, meaning no divine intervention, no fountain, and the burst damage from the Cruel in the mid game was able to come through. So that's one of the last points in the game you feel that SK are going to get team fights that are that easy, because now Clast is level 8, he's overdriven the Holy Nova, he won't be able to be affected by CC during the channeling of that ability. Still will get silenced afterwards, you imagine, after Hegman sees that ability get channeled, but now you're not going to get that easy engage, that easy sort of, I guess, meshing of stopping the Cruel going through to the team, because you won't be able to stun him out of it, which is one of the key things that Catherine is good at until Grace does overdrive that ability, and you saw it there from that last fight. But SK, maybe that mid-game advantage is all they needed, Dowsey, because you're looking at Cavalify very close to a broken myth. They needed a couple of fights in the trot to get their gold in the bank, and once Cavalify gets broken myth, which he just has now in the Crystal Infusion, they've already got to the point in the game where the late game CP interest is going to come on.
Yeah, certainly. There's the infusion procced once more as Cavalify's 9 runs out, upgrades to a level 11 infusion. And of course, the one thing that overdriving Holy Nova does is, like you mentioned, you can't be stunned, but it also means you can use your Crucible whilst channeling the Holy Nova. So there is potential for Class to not only knock the Catherine out of her Blast Tremor if Hegman was to misposition, but also to Crucible the Blast Tremor whilst Hegman goes in for engages. So, like you mentioned, a very easy team fight for SK before, but now things definitely going to be a little bit different. Not necessarily harder for SK because they've got Cavalify to this 3-item point on the address.
Yeah, like we said, they really only needed that mid-game boom to allow Cavalify the time to scale up. A couple of fights that they played so incredibly well, and I think that was facilitated specifically by that Echo, basically has allowed Cavalify to now scale up to the point where he's, doing exactly what you see here, just being a mega threat on the CT Idris, which we know scales up incredibly well. Hegman's also now picked up the Null Wave Gauntlet, essentially saying to Class, okay, well, you've overdriven Holy Nova, I've got another tool in my arsenal to stop you using things like Crucible and Fountain. Also means, you go Null Wave Gauntlet into a silence, into another silence. It's very difficult to play around that without your own reflex block, and I think Class will now soon be considering that. Not got the gold right now to do it, but will definitely be on the horizon for him.
Such incredible timing from SK, right? They haven't had a team fight since that Holy Nova was upgraded, but they've basically got the tools to counter the fact that Holy Nova is now overdriven and will prevent Class from being stunned whilst channeling it. Hegman hasn't felt the need to go towards any defensives because he has that bubble, the Stormguard bubble, which prevents him from taking too much damage. It allows him to tank up a lot of the burst damage that Sneaky can output if he positions well. And realistically, he's not even the target here. Cavalify is going to be the one that Salty Potatoes will be eagerly trying to burst down. And this is just what makes SK so brilliant, is their game timing throughout the series is just so well prepared and understood of what they need. That's going to be the stun onto Sneaky, and he's just going to take so much burst damage. Does get the Divine Intervention. Item Silence is on to Class. There's going to be Salty Potatoes just about escaping the double Blast Tremor. Wasn't impactful enough this time, but another stun onto Sneaky, who gets away just about, but the low health bars means that SK can take a turret, and if that's the end goal at the end of the day, is turrets and objectives, and they may even get some kills for themselves as Class basically goes in to try and save Sneaky but cannot do so. May just lose his life as well to Cavalify, who's got his Shimmer Strike, got so much damage, and another kill goes into his pocket. 3-0-2, SK now looking to try and push even more advantages for themselves.
And that's the 9 broken myth stack CP Idris for you. The basic attacks actually start to hit like trucks as well. Plus, you saw the power of the Holy Nova there, able to stop the engage from Tyrus and Kavalafar trying to jump in, but unfortunately, I actually think Joker ended up killing Sneaky with a reflect off the Storm Shield. As you see, Sneaky wasn't even attempting to attack Hegman when that Storm Shield was up, but I believe Joker actually did, so ended up killing his teammate, and that has allowed this very quick, shredding Kraken team to take the Kraken in a matter of seconds here. And Tyrus also, with the poison shift pickup a few minutes ago, is going to start to combat the sustain coming out from Class, the sustain coming out from Joker as well. Very clever pickup for him. Really all that he needs in terms of offensive capability here, because all that the Cruel is really here to do is reduce damage output now of someone, try and find a cheeky smite, but was really there also to help smooth the game into the late game to allow Kavalafar to hit this 4-item CP address.
Scoundrel Hegman's picked himself up a Stormguard banner. This is SK saying we are going to win this game right now. Extra 2 damage towards objectives. SK pushing the Kraken into the base. The choke turret is down. That Kraken is down to half HP. Hegman will likely look to try and get as much damage onto the turret. That's going to be the first blast tremor blocked, and Oblivion will go out. Hegman does get put to sleep, but he's going to recover fairly shortly. And look at Tyrus on the turret, taking so much damage on the front line, but a heal will get there. And that's going to be the second Vein Crystal turret falling as we speak. Vein Crystal exposed, Class losing his life to Kavalafar, and this should be SK finishing the job in just a second. Unless Sneaky has something to say about it, but Hegman and the banner looking to do it all. I don't think he can.
Ace.
Salty Potatoes find the ace. They protect their Vein Crystal down to the last HP. They live to tell the story.
What a defense from Salty Potatoes there, but SK come away with pretty much everything except that final win. They won't be too displeased with how they used that Kraken. Often getting, 2 turrets of Kraken is great, but getting every single turret left on the map with that first Kraken push is always fantastic for them. Maybe a little bit too focused on the Kraken, didn't quite respect the defense potential of this now almost 4-item weapon power Kestrel and 3-item, including Broken Myth, CP Samuel. So the damage is there for Salty Potatoes if they can find the fights in their favor. You can see Sneaky's even gone for a Bonesaw here. That's a little bit odd. The Bonesaw pickup for me, you're not really playing against any armor apart from that of Tyrus. Tyrus has only got a coat of bait, so it's not like you're facing up a team against Metal Jackets. It feels like this was a preemptive Bonesaw pickup for Sneak. I don't think it's a bad pickup in general, because obviously there's always base armor to shred through, and at level 12, sometimes base armor is just enough to warrant even getting some armor pierce on your side, but probably would have preferred to have seen just literally the straight-up critical strike build from him. But he's gone for the Bonesaw, so even if there is armor built now, he can now plan into the future. You've also got 33 stacks on Catherine as well, so you do want to probably respect the amount of armor that she's picked up, because that's 66 in its own right, just off her heroic perk.
The Bonesaw is fairly typical. It's the most efficient build for like all-round Kestrel play, because your Glimmer Shots actually will provide stacks for the Bonesaw, and so you could actually put Bonesaw stacks onto multiple targets, which is something that not many heroes can do. So it's definitely like a Druid favorite when it comes to Kestrel. He definitely popularized this build over in East Asia. But you're right, there is very little armor being built by SK, if not for the natural stacking of the Catherine. Salty Potatoes wanting to defend this Kraken at this point. Look at that, Hegman has Stormcrown, he can solo this, and SK just going to, be a front line that Salty Potatoes don't want to cross. Hegman's got this Kraken down just a little bit. I think Salty Potatoes know what's happening. Here comes the Sneaky, but he's going to get stunned instantly, and Kavalafar's on Joker as well, who's struggling to escape the CP interest as Shimmer Strike finds the kill. Salty will lose their carry as well. Sneaky goes down, and Class for the double kill. That is it, an ace for SK. They're going to push into the base.
And again, that was a really nice play from SK. They knew that they could allow Catherine to solo the Kraken with the Stormcrown, the amount of stacks that she had built up as well, meaning that Tyrus and Kavalafar could play this aggressive style, warding the Salty Potatoes roster away from the Kraken pit, and just basically forcing them to either face check into a Cruel, which is something that you never want to do at this stage in the game. And then obviously they tried to make the flank happen, but the collapse from Tyrus and Hegman was just too good. And Sneaky, as soon as he revealed himself, made himself an instantaneous target for that Cruel ultimate, and then a chain stun from the Hegman. So I think just really lovely played. I think some of those mid-game team fights around before Holy Nova was overdriven from Clast was really good from SK. It allowed them to smooth over to the late game where Kavalafar came online. Wasn't
the cleanest game from SK, but it was certainly a masterclass of how to play your compositions, win conditions to a T. 1-0 to SK. Let's hear from Munchables.
1-0 to SK indeed. Salty Potatoes started off the game strong, but beyond sort of the 10-minute mark, they seemed to take their foot off the accelerator, and SK were more than happy to punish them for that. Started to take control of the game themselves and managed to snowball that into a victory. Guys, talk me through kind of the storyline of this game.
I mean, it's something that we always talk about, playing to your win conditions. Salty Potatoes did not play to their win conditions, and it cost them massively. They have a siege comp. We mentioned it during the draft. They don't have hard engage. They need to just be focusing on sieging the lane, clearing the jungle where you can, but all of your pressure needs to be focused on the lane, and they just simply didn't do it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we saw this comp actually come out from Gangstars yesterday against TSM, and they nearly won with it. And how they did that was they continued sieging. They got a turret before 4 minutes. Salty Potatoes never got a turret. They got 2 kills early on, but they never continued their pressure like they should have. And then once Cruel got to level 6, SK were just ganking the chain of crowd control from the stun into the Cruel ult. They were able to get kills, and that's how they scale their composition to win the game.
Absolutely. We have a replay from around 15 minutes into the game, which was when CP Idris started to get his items, and SK could really start to actually win these fights.
And Salty Potatoes are starting on the back foot here, and when you have a siege comp, if you're low like this, it's never going to work out because you're just going to get jumped on. That's exactly what SK did. SK did a great job of recognizing the opportunities that they had and playing aggressive, diving into the siege comp over and over again before they could have the ability to kite backwards. So it was a well-played game by SK, just as much as it was a poorly played game from the side of Salty Potatoes.
I mean, before the start of that clip too, we saw Cruel manage to get an ult on Kestrel, catching her out of position.
Yep.
I think the story was definitely more that Salty Potatoes were getting a little bit out of position. They didn't know how to play their composition in formation.
Yeah.
It's very specific that you have to have Grace in the front and Kestrel and Samuel right behind her together.
And that's the kind of mistake you can't afford to make when you're against a team like SK. They are going to punish you for that. Now, we saw SK try and force the issue further after getting a crack, and they tried to end the game. They forced it a little bit too hard, though.
Yeah, just a little bit. They maybe got a little overzealous, thinking that they were obviously very far ahead, but this is still a siege comp. This is still a kiting and poke comp, and they were able to just be able to do that while Tyraz and the rest of SK were trying to just focus on the objectives. They weren't doing damage to their opponents, and that's when Salty Potatoes were able to find an opportunity. But again, this was one of those situations that casters talked about. Like, you're not upset about this. You're not like, oh no, we just almost, like, they didn't almost throw the game or anything like that. It's just, they just had to end the game a little bit later. It wasn't a big deal.
If there's a couple more bad fights after that, then you get upset about the fact that that happened. But let's take a look at the final fight of that game, where SK managed to just find themselves in yet another 3v3, and this is the perfect situation for their composition.
This was pretty much the last team fight of the game, and SK, you can see Broken Myth is already 4 stacks, 5 stacks for a Qualifier. It was SK dealing damage to Salty Potatoes, and Salty Potatoes not doing anything. They were also very separated. Kestrel was on the other side of the wall near the jungle shop, and you can't do that. I was just talking about the formation that you have to play for this composition. You can't be a split. You have to stick together. Grace in the front, Kestrel and Samuel in the back line. It has to be played that way. Otherwise, especially if you're playing against CP Idris, whose backline damage is so high, you're going to lose the team fight, especially if you're so far behind in gold anyway.
All right, let's start to talk about the draft coming into the next game in this series. Can we afford to see another siege composition coming out from Salty Potatoes? With the way that they played this game, is that the best composition for this defensive style?
If they play it the way they did in this game, absolutely not. Because they played like they had a fighting composition when they just didn't. They didn't play like a siege comp whatsoever. And so I think they need to get something that has some solid engage and follow-up. That's the key. Is, Grace has great engage, but there's no follow-up from the composition that they just had. So if you're going to go for the engage, you need to have the ability to follow it up.
I mean, if you're going up against a team like SK, it's good to at least have a clear win condition, such as sieging the lane and such as sieging the turrets. So if they go for it again, it's not the problem, it's just their execution, like you're saying, Disney Bacon. So if they get it, make sure you siege those turrets, make sure you stay together in team fights. Otherwise, go for something a little bit more diverse.
All right, we'll see where they do decide to go with this one. SK's composition definitely seemed to work out for them, this kind of hard engaged composition where you have a lot of dive, a lot of ability to skirmish. Wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing out of them, but SK once again going for this Celeste ban.
Yeah, and like I mentioned last draft, it was that SK doesn't play the Celeste, and they know Salty Potatoes have a very strong Celeste, so just taking it off the board, making sure it's not a factor. Salty Potatoes, I like the fact that they're banning away the Catherine here, because even though they're leaving the Grace open for SK, and they're not going to be able to take the Catherine in response, they can still go for the Lyra. And if they were to have the same composition they had last game, but throw a Lyra in the mix, all of a sudden, that becomes an even stronger Siege comp. And if they just if they actually play it like a Siege comp, it's a really strong composition. Yeah. They just need to play it right. But they're going to take the Idris away. So I like this adaptation from Salty Potatoes.
I like the Idris pick, but only if you're going to ban or pick the Black Feather. If they don't ban or pick the Black Feather, I definitely expect SK to go for the Black Feather and let Kvalifar play it against the CP Idris, especially combined with the Grace. We saw it come out yesterday as such a great dive pick that has a lot of sustain with Grace, but they do ban the Black Feather, so I like this draft so far from Salty Potatoes. They're definitely targeting Kvalifar, who's by far the weakest link in SK when it comes to the draft and the hero pool. So far, what he has played when he doesn't have the Idris or the Black Feather has been either the Weapon Power Pedal or the Lance. These are the two things that he's been successful on. So it will most likely be a Weapon Power Pedal, just because Lance is a little bit riskier and Weapon Power Pedal is so strong. Let's see what Salty Potatoes tries to go for, though. It's most likely going to be a captain hero here.
I mean, they could even take the Lance for themselves as a captain, but it is going to be the Finn. So I don't like Finn with Idris. I really don't, just because of the fact that Idris wants to be going in fairly deep. Even as a CP Idris, you're going to throw those chakras, you're going to poke a little bit, but eventually you're going to go diving into the enemy team or having to run and use your Shimmer Strike to get away from the enemy team. Either way, you're putting a lot of distance between yourself and your Finn, who's the whole point of the Finn with an Idris or with a hyper carry like that is to protect them, and you're going to be moving so far away from that protection. We'll see if it can work out, but with the Scarf coming through, this is another pick that Kvalifar has gone onto when his primary picks are taken away, but he hasn't had the strongest of performances with it.
Yeah, I didn't mention it just because he hasn't been successful on it this season at least. And going up against CP Idris and Finn. So you talk about how you don't like them. I actually like them quite a bit, Tasty Bacon, if they manage to scale. If this composition of CP Idris and Finn gets to late game, they can be extremely strong because it's a lot of damage on the back line and a lot of tankiness on the front line, especially against Scarf, who's a hero, doesn't have a lot of early game aggression. If they manage to scale, it would be really good for them. However, SK does have Cruel, who we know can be so aggressive and can make sure to get advantages.
And so this last pick is going to become extremely important for Salty Potatoes. Their jungle pick almost certainly. There's a few options, but you figure it's going to be something that's weapon power, and it is going to be the Lance coming through. So a little bit surprised that they picked it up this late in the draft instead of going for it, earlier on. But now that there is a Kroll on the opposite side, that's one of the reasons they do pick it up. Lance and Finn can stop a Kroll from getting onto the back lines, and this Idris actually now, because they have the Lance, I do like the Finn a little bit better because of the fact that now the Idris doesn't have to go diving. They can just stay back. They can just protect the Idris.
It very much becomes that protect the carry composition. Quick thoughts on this matchup here.
The biggest issue for me with Salty Potatoes composition is they don't have a lot of range. So if Scarf is going to be able to poke a lot, and their engage is not the strongest if Idris doesn't manage to get ahead.
All right, we'll see if Idris can get ahead in this one. It's time to jump into game 2 of this series. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter. Let us know whether you want Salty Potatoes to get back on into this one. But let's pass it back over to Dowsy and X-Scoundrel for game number 2.
All right, second game of this series, SK looking to make it 2-0, but Salty Potatoes, they have a very strong pick in this. Idris Sneaky will have to pilot it to perfection if he wants to take down Kvalifar's Scarf.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very strong protect the Idris composition from Salty Potatoes going out. Obviously, the Desk talked about it. You've got Lance, not going to be too bad into the Cruel early on here. Cluster's going to be very careful, though. SK are looking to be super aggressive, at least get a forward healing Treant, trying to abuse as much as they can, and they will come away with it. So in the early game, this is not a bad pick into the Cruel. I don't think they're going to have too tough a time. You can just Githyanwall Wall and walk away if you absolutely have to, if you're taking the wrong end of a trade versus the Cruel early on. Here is the Joker. Not quite as simple as that, but pretty much sums it up. And then in the late game, they're going to be probably transitioning into this very heavy protect Sneaky composition. Both Class and Joker there to peel for Sneaky against the Cruel. In the late game, Cruel's not going to touch Sneaky. Not easily anyway. Even if an ultimate lands, you've got to get through these two essential brick walls to get to your target. The problem that I feel Salty Potato is going to have is going to be Cavalifar and this Scarf. We already know that Finn is like a stacking machine for the likes of Scarf and Celeste. Well, Finn and Lance, very, low-range melee heroes, they're going to allow Cavalifar to stack and get damage off like crazy, especially with that burn coming through as well, Dowsey. So that's my one worry for Salty Potatoes as this game goes.
No, I have to agree. The ability for SK to siege with this Scarf, a military operation in which enemy forces surround a turret.
Nice meme.
Nice meme. That's literally the dictionary definition of siege. Is that? But of course, in Vainglory, it's when Scarf puts his goop on a turret and you can't do anything about it. Look at this, Joker struggling to get away from Tyras here. They're just focusing him down, full stacks of weakness to smite away, and that should be first blood. Easily going over to SK. Hegman able to secure that for Tyras. Now SK going to move into the backs and try and steal away some farm.
Yeah, Joker was trying to play a little bit of fancy feet there, trying to find that Githyanwall Wall opportunity. Maybe he should have just Githyanwall Walled and ran as soon as the Cruel got onto him there with Finn not around. Because what you want to do is, as soon as Cruel appears on you at this stage in the game, if you're the Joker, Githyanwall Wall, break the distance, Finn can quibble, Finn can polite company as well, and then you just sort of run straight towards your turret. Because you don't want to get locked into a melee brawl with a Cruel, because he will just beat you. Cruel beats most other melee heroes in sort of hand-to-hand combat. So, I think at this point you just Githyanwall Wall and say, okay, I got the wrong end of this trade, run away. But he kind of played around, tried to play fancy feet there, and sort of ended up spelling his demise.
Right now, SK got themselves a minor lead. Tyra's going to be closer to getting that tension bow online, which is when the Cruel becomes very devastating to the squishy targets like an Idris. And that's when SK really going to be looking to apply the full force of a Scarf Siege. The Spitfires from range can connect with the turret. If they do, then a Goop is pretty much unstoppable, burns the turret in half. And with 2.8, the reduction of health of turrets by 1,000 health makes it a very easy 600 gold for the team to pick up, and that's what SK are going to be continuing to threaten. Class not really able to run away from a Cruel, makes him very easy target for SK to poke on down, and it forces rotations from Joker, which is not where he wants to be. He wants to be hard farming and trying to get that Sorrow Blade and Tension Bow picked up for the Lance, so that he is a threatening force towards Cavalifar.
Yeah, definitely. Those are two big item spikes for the Lance specifically. Where he goes from there will give us a lot of indication about what he wants to achieve in this game. I imagine, we've seen people top out at Sorrow Blade, go full defensive. I imagine he'll go Sorrow Blade, breaking Sorrow Blade Tension Bow, or even Tension Bow Sorrow Blade, and then cap out and then go more of a defensive peel focus build for Sneaky. Actually going for the Tension Bow early on, meaning that he wants to be able to put a little bit of early game pressure down onto Cavalifar. All about trying to find these impales. It doesn't have to be just Cavalifar. If you can impale Tyras in the early game, he's just an easier target for Salty Potatoes as Cavalifar is. And it also means that Cavalifar will have to respect how close he lets himself get to Joker on this Lance, because there is always that engaged potential of the Lance Impale, and if Cavalifar gets caught out by it and not having a reflex block right now, probably going to get hit hard. Cavalifar does pick up his first tier 3 item though. That Frostburn has come through already for him though, so suddenly controlling that front line has become a little bit better for SK. You can control the pace of the Finn and the Lance by that Frostburn, as well as having the Goop. The burn will slow them down too, so that's a good pickup for him. Good to control those heavy melee front lines from SK. And here's the engage from Joker.
Yeah, Joker does a lot of damage, but Cavalifar gets the fountain, he'll heal him up. He's now stunned up, lots of stacks, will get smited down to a very unfortunate amount of health, but seems like the fight's gone fairly even if you consider that Cavalifar is a little bit too low to be threatening a forward position. Maybe Tyras can open up some windows of opportunity, as the Chakram does a lot of work from Sneaky. He's opted in for the Shadow Glass as his first item, and you can see the difference in damage that provides when he does hit both the forward and the return of the Chakram. SK though, fantastic range. They're able to clear the wave and set up for a backport here, though with Joker coming into lane once more. They're going to have to stick under their turret as Salty Potatoes fancy a bit of siege of themselves. They're in the wave. They have a lot of potential to burst down the turret. With a Shatter Glass makes things very easy for the Idris. That's a lot of damage going on to Sneaky in the goop. Eggman has to be careful. Going to be able to walk away for now as Tyros will come back to lane. This should just force Salty Potatoes back far enough that SK can go about their business. I doubt SK really want to siege too hard here. I could be wrong though. They've got Fountain coming up in just a second. They've got Dragon's Breath and From Hell's Heart available as well. The Spitfire connects. Valafar not really able to get into range to place the goop. That might just be the end of the story as Sneaky wants to backport.
Yeah, and Kvelafar here just doing his best to try and clear these waves out as much as possible. I like the fact that Sneaky, by the way, has gone for Shatter Glass here, because I think in the later stages of the game, the only threat that you'll be concerned about is the Scarf. So your primary directive in a lot of ways is going to be trying to burst Scarf if you get the opportunity to do so. And obviously, you know, with the amount of peel that you got, why? Wait a second.
Ooh, that's a bit of over-aggression coming out from the side of Salty Potatoes, and like that, we lose a Finn, who's always going to be an easy target for SK. Like you mentioned, once Broken Myth is online, he's going to provide the stacks to Kvelafar, but in this early game, it's very easy for Tyros to actually just take him out himself.
Yeah, and Sneaky actually forced back here, and Hegman just going to be able to stun up Joker, who attempted to get a bit of work done. So good peel back, good pressure onto Sneaky, who pretty much only just returned to lane. It's going to be forced back once more. Kvelafar got about 1,600 gold in the bank, so he'll be able to work towards that Eve of Harvest as his second item here. A lot of sustain coming out. Easy targets to sustain from as well, Dalsy, those two big, beefy heroes in the front line. Whilst they are great at protecting, they're also great for Kvelafar to hit big hero models, easy Spitfire targets, easy regeneration from him with this Eve of Harvest too, so not too bad if you're the Scarf on this side of the field. Sneaky also, like I said, not going to be too bothered about the Frostburn in this game because, you know, he's got that much peel in the late game. You don't need to add much more. Too many chefs spoil the broth. Whilst Frostburn probably would be, and you know, a nice addition. It's not absolutely necessary when you've got a Finn, a Lance, you know, Polite Company, Githian Wool, Impale, Forced Accord, Quibble, all of these skills that will be able to peel for Sneaky in some way, shape or form, and no real way to circumvent them for SK. You just want that flat-out burst damage to combine with that Broken Myth later on, which is where you're going to start to chunk through that front line from SK.
It's going to be a Hell's Heart landing on Joker as Sneaky gets away, but maybe Joker cannot. No, he cannot. Spike comes through as the Fountain gets popped, and that will burst him down before the Fountain hits him. Salty Potatoes lose another. This is a dangerous game. Going to really protect their turret hard here, and I don't think they have the tools to do it, though Kvelafar taking a lot of damage. Divine Intervention will come out to heal him, and Tyros should be able to finish the turret off, as Sneaky now going to be in trouble. Uses that Shimmer Strike to reposition from Clast, and that should be okay for Sneaky, but that turret goes down, and SK with a pretty nice lead.
Yeah, they've generated a about 1,500 gold lead here. It's not too bad for them, but they're going to try and extend that with the take of the gold mine. Doesn't look like Salty Potatoes are in a position to even contest, should they even want to, which they apparently do not. And are happy to give over SK a bit more gold, which is going to allow Kvelafar, who seems to be working towards third item Clockwork, something that I actually quite like, although I'm honest, when you're up against a Finn and a Lance, like they are broken Myth stack machines. Like they are so easy to just consistently keep yourself in combat with and build those Broken Myth stacks. He looks like he's just going for a more poke-orientated build, which I think both of them have their value. Something that I've noticed the way that Kvelafar has been playing these team fights, he's so liberal with his use of Dragon's Breath, which not a lot of Scarfs like to do. I really like the way he's doing it because it almost forces Salty Potatoes back as this stun lands, the engage happens.
There it is, Dragon's Breath will come out as well, and Sneaky will just about escape, but Class burning as this Joker. Going to be a Forced Accord blocked up. As SK fairly convincingly taking a team fight win, which will allow them to take this Crystal Sentry away. Despite not getting a kill, this is the one thing that SK do so well, and you know, I think the top European teams have practiced for a long time, Scoundrel, is getting themselves objectives and advantages without kills.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. Something that we've seen a lot of European teams do so well is even if you take one kill, even if you just force an enemy team back, the European teams right now are getting very good, and I think it's almost adopting something from North America, because North America have been doing this for a while. It's just getting something off the map with the time that you have bought your team, and SK have been one of the main European teams to adapt to this and play it incredibly well. Every time they have an opportunity, they are taking something on the map, be it a gold mine, be it that crystal sentry, be it even attempting to siege a turret with just forcing that man advantage by forcing someone back to base. And I've been incredibly impressed. These low kill games from SK Gaming resulting in a huge gold leads because they're playing, you know, very much a global map focused game. It's something that we talked about in other MOBAs. The Koreans kind of brought this style of play over a few years ago, and a lot of other teams took a very long time to adapt. Well, it feels like SK have learned lessons early on here in the Vainglory competitive esport lifetime, and they are starting to adapt very quickly, realizing how important global gold is, because it's just free gold sitting on the map, and if you buy yourself that time to take it, it's just so easy to get yourself into a position where you're, well, apparently engaged.
Sneaky in trouble. Oh, wow. Where did he go? He disappeared, Scoundrel. If you find Sneaky, please DM me on Twitter, as I'm currently looking for my Salty Potatoes laner. It's SK now going to take this turret. There's nothing really that Salty Potatoes could do about it. So much range, and Tyra's able to heal it and tank it up, whatever necessary. And this is where the Frostburn comes back in. If you want to reignite that discussion, Scoundrel, is that SK realistically don't want you to all in them, ever, because that's not their playstyle. They're very good at team fighting, and they probably could deal with it if you were to all in them, but the Frostburn buys them so much range and so much kiting potential so that they can take the fight that they want, and Cavalifar really consistently supplies that to his team with his choice of item builds.
Yeah, and I think he plays very specifically around the Frostburn with his item build here as well. A lot of it, the time, it feels like he is building to facilitate Tyra's as well. You know, Tyra's in this particular instance is going to have a tough time against two tanky frontliners who are able to bat him away, stun him, knock him, you know, knock him back and forth. Cavalifar feels like he's building specifically just to facilitate Tyra's, who a lot of people call out as the superstar of this SK lineup, the one that realistically kind of brought a bit of reinvigoration to them when they made this kind of shake-up. They had that shake-up where they went from Team Secret to what you see now, and Tyra's is one of the main benefactors behind some reinvigoration for Cavalifar. Heggman's now come in and do the same. Attempted defense of the Crystal Sentry is going to fall flat on its face, as we just see Scarf absolutely rip through it, as we know Scarf's to do.
Now Cavalifar's really getting to a dangerous position. 800 gold in his back pocket. He needs another 1300 roughly at this point, and he will have himself the Broken Myth, and that means those Dragon's Breaths not only going to be a great slowing tool, which we've seen kind of allow Tyros to stick to his main target and burst down with this Cruel, but also just going to be a burning tool. People will melt, there will be deaths, and it won't be pretty. SK, another beautiful block from Heggman, who's been once more an absolute fantastic addition to the team. Just able to keep everyone above water. Now SK pushing in, slowly but surely ticking away at the health bars. Cavalifar hitting key Spitfires onto Sneaky, and if it's not onto Sneaky, it's onto Classed, and this tanky Finn becoming an easy target at this point. SK very far backwards, but Joker does get baited in. Cavalifar pops his boots to get out of range, and now they can re-engage if they wish to. It's the last life of the Crystal Sentry, and SK may just take it away if they lose Classed here. Fountain comes out, that's going to be a stun onto Sneaky. The Dragon's Breath will burn him alive, and maybe a double kill for Cavalifar, as he's not quite able to get in range, but the turret will go down, and SK very likely to just rotate towards the middle of the map and put the pressure back onto Salty Potatoes.
Yeah, and that was such a nicely timed ultimate from Tyra's as well. They just managed to force Class to use that that fountain, because with the clockwork as a Scarf, you may know, you could actually get two burning goops down at the same time, and Cavalifar managed to do that, and it made it very difficult for Class, a particularly slow hero, to position around the double burning goop. Almost had to walk through it, taking all of that damage, forcing the fountain out early just to save his own life, and at that point they knew that there was very little sustain left in the tank here for Salty Potatoes, and again Tyra's opens up with that ultimate onto Sneaky that wasn't blocked, hasn't been blocked pretty much all game so far, and they end up getting the kill, which was allowing them, obviously once you take out Sneaky, realistically the only major threat at this point in the game. then that's kind of the win for SK. As soon as Sneaky dies, the Salty Potato composition dies, and that's just then a win for SK from that point.
Yeah, it's been pretty much that way for quite some time now. Look at this, SK have out-rotated Salty Potatoes. Salty Potatoes will be desperately looking for a team fight here, but there's a broken myth on Cavalifar, and it's starting to stack up here. 3 stacks up to 4. Oh dear, Dragon's Breath will just hurt so much if SK were to go for it, and Force Cord isn't even in range. No need for a Crucible from Hegman, who has just been so on point with those as far. That's the last Crystal Sentry, it's been eliminated. There's no fear for SK to fight in the jungle, as if there was any way beforehand. And now Salty Potatoes are desperately looking to find a fight that would favor them in these tight corridors. There's a good position. That's Cavalifar taking a lot of damage. The Founder comes through. Divine Intervention will proc as well. There's the goop placed on down a Dragon's Breath. He's got 4 stacks and he's coming on in for some damage of his own. Joker should fall very shortly to Tyra's. Clast will go down on the sideline, and Cavalifar's just moving into position to finish the rest of the Salty Potatoes. Sneaky gets tagged by a Spitfire, and Tyra's will finish his counterpart, Jungler. 7-0 to SK. Flawless gameplay from them, and the Kraken's ready to be taken.
You almost said flawless. That was major mispositional error from SK right at the start, but just through the pure amount of sustain that they're bringing, no poison shiv as well, because it's not something that Joker will build into his build path as a weapon power lance frequently. Just means that Cavalifar was able to sustain up from practically near death. I think he must have survived on sub 50 HP at the end there. But then past that area of terrain, able to then reignite goops. And again, this Clockwork build so very good at utilizing probably the major part of Scarf's teamfight utility and teamfight damage, which is those ignited goops. They are probably one of his main sources of damage in teamfights, especially because of the way it basically red flags certain parts of the terrain when you're trying to teamfight a team with a Scarf. And just was able to then find his way back in, as Tyra is again just able to, put pressure on targets, kind of being unfocused, because you don't want to focus a Cruel so heavily when you've got a Scarf with 4 items. And that's another big engage.
He's just dead. Sneaky's dead. This is GG. If Salty Potatoes can't somehow turn this around, and Joker's already going down, Class not in range for a Fountain, so there will be no healing for this Lance. Does about get over the wall. Spitfire doesn't connect, but Clast has lost his life, and he has given up at this point as well. SK just too good for Salty Potatoes, Scoundrel. Hegman just being a nuisance to the Joker, who's trying his best to run and get to the base, but he can't. And Cavalifar's already taken down turret number 1 with the help of Tyras. This is GG to SK. Once more looking unstoppable here in Europe, and they will be going to the finals to look for a 3rd week in a row, Scoundrel. We'll have to find out if there's anyone in Europe who can stop them.
They look very polished at this point in time. The Kraken will eventually knock down the Vein Crystal. SK letting Salty Potatoes go out the long, very slow, painful way, as Kraken does what she does best and pounds down on the structures. SK take the series 2-0.
If Class is going to stand there and allow SK to kill them, then I think SK with well within their rights to allow the Kraken to take the Vein Crystal the slow route as well. Salty Potatoes not quite at it today, and SK will be our finalist. Let's hear from our analysts to see what they thought of this series.
Well, that was a very one-sided game to round out this series. SK Gaming going to take this on 2-0 with a perfect game coming on through there as well for SK Gaming. Excellent work there. It's often like people forget something about Cavalifar, according to Scoundrel, but Cavalifar definitely did an exceptional job on that Scarf this game.
Yeah, played really well, but I'm going to, as much as it pains me to do, because I really like Salty Potatoes, I think you have to focus on Salty Potatoes for this game, because they just came out so flat. This did not look like a top European team. This didn't look like a top 4 European team. They looked very, very poor. And we talked about consistency. This was the definition of inconsistent, because yesterday they looked pretty good against Fnatic. Today, they did not look good whatsoever.
I absolutely agree. I mean, they just showed me that they really had no clear understanding of how to play these compositions that they went for today in both games. So maybe it's time for them to go back and start start from identifying what their strengths are so that they can start playing to them when they go up against these VGA teams.
Honestly, I feel like this is a similar situation to something that Evil was saying yesterday in an interview, in that when you're against these top teams, you just got to turn off the nameplates. You got to play your game. Don't allow yourself to be intimidated, because that's what it felt like to me in this series, was that Salty, they knew their win conditions but weren't willing to commit to them against a team like SK. Let's take a look at SK taking their second turret of the game at around 11 minutes.
Yeah, and you can see here with the fact that they're just getting caught. Like, the Joker's nowhere close. They saw all 3 members of SK up in the lane, and the Joker just wasn't even really close to be able to get there in time. Sneaky just gets deleted in an instant. It was his first death of the game, but that was just because SK, they didn't have a composition that was meant to be pressuring them all game long, so they were just taking turrets. They were just pushing the lane. Like, this was SK almost running this composition similar to a Siege comp, and not being punished for it.
I mean, it pretty much is. Once Scarf gets scaled a little bit, his damage is so good he can start sieging one turret after another. Talking about SK, I definitely want to give them a shout out, because they seem to know exactly what they needed to do with every composition today so far. So they're playing like we expect them to.
Yeah, they absolutely have been playing exceptionally. And around 16 minutes into that game, they managed to grab themselves a double kill that led on to a Kraken as well. So this was one of the few fights that we saw this game.
This was a team fight that actually Salty Potatoes did what they needed to do. This was the first time they went in and tried to engage instead of just sitting around waiting for SK to poke them and kill them. And because they did it so late into the game, they were already 7k behind. It did not work for them because it's a little too late. So after this team fight, SK managed to clean up. They go get the Kraken and they finish with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, beyond that point, there was very little or even up to that point, there was very little Salty Potatoes could do. And you saw in that fight, Kvalifar survives on a sliver of HP before the Grey Salt actually comes in. Had this happened with less of a gold lead, he would have gone down there, and that easily could have been a Salty Potatoes fight.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the way Salty Potatoes should have been fighting. At like the 8-minute mark, at the 8 to 10-minute mark, that's the way Salty Potatoes should have been trying to play this composition. I mean, you have this protect the carry composition, but you can't protect the carry if your front line is just getting poked and whittled down before you try and make a fight happen, before your carry can even be a carry. And the other thing was this Finn. Again, Finn without an echo just did nothing. I don't think a single forced accord actually connected, because Hegman was phenomenal with his reflex blocks. And the fact that the rest of SK, Tyrus and Kvalifar, were so trusting every single time a forced accord came out, Hegman crucibled it, and Kvalifar and Tyrus kept their reflex blocks for the Lance. And there were so many team fights where, you know, a Lance Impale may have been able to turn the fight, but it got reflex blocked because those carries were able to hold those because they trusted their captain to be able to block the hook.
I mean, you talk about the pull coming from Finn and the Crucible blocking it every single time. Had Finn went for an echo, there would have been 2 pulls and only 1 Crucible to block it. He went for the Crucible second instead, the Finn, and there wasn't really a reason. I keep seeing captain players go for Crucible when there isn't a real reason for it against the composition. Sometimes you go against the Catherine, you need a Crucible. Sometimes you go against the Finn, you need a Crucible. But if you're going up against the Grays, there really isn't one. So try to prioritize your items correctly.
It's kind of like going for the default build, even though it's not necessarily the best build for the situation. Let's take a look at an interview we now have with Tyrus, who's going to be joining us on the stream. First of all, congratulations on your clean 2-0 there and a perfect win in your second game.
Thanks a lot. I mean, we were pretty confident against this team. And the first match was actually like the first match we played today as a team together. So we counted as a warm-up match. We struggled a little bit in the early game. Second match was much cleaner. We had one bad fight in their jungle area, which was luckily we were pretty ahead, so that wasn't... we didn't fall back from that, so we could just take Kraken and finish the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you didn't even lose a death, so it wasn't that bad of a fight for you guys. I want to ask you about the upcoming semi-final later on today, or in fact, the next series we're going to be bringing to the screens. G2 versus Dynasty. Obviously, the winner's going to be going against you guys in the finals. What are your thoughts on that matchup? Who do you think is going to take it, and who do you want to take it?
I mean, who we want to take it, I guess it's probably Dynasty because they're low on the bracket and G2 get less points from that. But I think G2 is definitely going to be the fan favorite going into this matchup. though Dynasty has proven in the past that they can pull up some magical stuff and win matches for them. With, for example, I think it was a Taka CP with against a Jewel even. If you guys remember this match, but let's see.
Yeah, they've definitely pulled out some interesting stuff over the course of the Vainglory8, and I'm curious to see what they have lined up for this semi-final. I want to ask you a little bit about the meta currently in Vainglory as well, because it seems incredibly open right now. Is there a particular style that you feel is the strongest in the current meta, or is it just kind of a matter of each individual draft going a different way?
I mean, this meta currently feels like everything is open, everything can be played. I mean, Weapon Battle. I mean, even Weapon Rhyme was shown. It feels as though it's really focused on team play, team coordination, because the jungler is not. I mean, I have to share my farm a lot with Kevalfa recently, and it's happening a lot that we're in the same level, or he's even ahead of me. So I guess it's just all about team play, team coordination, and whoever has the better win condition wins the game and can pull off that win condition, obviously.
All right, so all about team play. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the stream, Tyras, as ever, and good luck in your finals later on today. But we can nominate our MVP for that series. It's going to be Kevalfa on this one. Sat there on the scarf, especially during that second game, able to just dish out the damage permanently throughout that match, and just exceptional clean play. But again, this is one of those teams and one of those series where, honestly, you could give this to just about any player.
Yeah, and like Tyra said, it's all about team play, and that's what makes SK so good right now, is their team play. They are team-oriented. You know, he was saying it himself, you know, they're giving farm to both carries, even in the jungle, and that's why it makes it so difficult to choose an MVP for them.